And I'm busy talking with the microphone muted, despite the fact that, as I was just saying about Stream Deck telling me we're live when I was looking over there, you're telling me I got the microphone muted, and it isn't muted now. So, dear, one of these days I'll get used to actually what I'm doing. Maybe one of these days I'll even put a monitor in front of me so I can see myself without looking over there. And that's not being vain, that's just to check that I'm actually doing what I think I'm doing. Right, and what I think I'm doing tonight is realigning this axis here, this one. So I've got to realign, make sure that I've got the right distance here between these two nuts on the back, and between here and here. So these two rods are a very precise distance apart. Don't quite know at this point in time why there's an insistence on it. Well, I do actually. I was going to say an exact distance between these two nuts, because I do the same thing on the front here as well. And of course the reason for getting those two exact is because you want this to be square, not cockeyed at an angle. If it was at an angle, then this would have problems running on it, because these two bearings will not be correctly aligned. So we start with this measuring jig, measuring jug, which is supplied as part of the kit. And what I've got to do here is each of these sticky out bits are 22 millimeters wide, and this here is supposed to be 20. It's supposed to be 22. That's way out. And I've aligned that once already. Why is it so far out? Wow. That surprised me. They were aligned previously, and now they're going to be at least a couple of millimeters out. Now that's kind of surprised me a little bit. Not that those rods are about right, but I wonder why that's so far out. Okay, well that's going to take a fair bit of realigning, so let's get to it. 22 millimeters from the nuts. I wonder if it gave a different measurement last time. I'm just going to scroll backwards in the build instructions. Come on, this PC is being a little bit slow. Okay, go back one then. I just want to read this. and just see. I'm surprised I'm that far out. So I'm wondering if it said a different measurement last time. Maybe it didn't give a measurement last time. Oh well. I am just a little bit puzzled, but not enough to worry about. So we need to move everything over, which is going to be interesting to do. So we'll start by loosening off those nuts. Probably using a spanner that fits will help. Right, so what I'm going to do is just roughly put that one where it wants to be. I'll do exactly the same thing here at the front. Put the nut roughly where it wants to be, because I will check the measurements. Now then, the challenge of this is that because this carriage is there, this rod has to move over at the same time. So I've really just got to loosen these off completely, which will let the rod slide over. So what I'm going to do is screw that up there, screw that up there, and then we'll check the measurement. So that is actually too tight, but if I then, there we go. Oh, it turns that way. A little bit more. So this wants to go in without catching. It's been nice and smooth, and that's that there. So tighten this one up just to tighten the rod up, and keep checking that hasn't moved, which it hasn't. So that's probably tight enough there. And I do the same thing again on the front here. So that nut is actually a bit too close, so we'll tighten it this way. Okay, that's okay. Now we tighten that. That's a bit loose. Okay. I could rock it or move it side to side. I can rock it slightly, but that's fine. The two rods have to be parallel to each other, and if not, it wears your bearings out and the jam and just basically catch each other, which is not a good thing. And I've just realised that one thing I ought to do with this is just do that slightly as well. There we go. Right, that's me more central. Now then, what I've now got to do is align this other right hand side. Now, actually that's a lot smoother than it was. That's kind of one trick to get it partially aligned, is just to slide that up and down, because this rod is fixed. This one will move, and I can see it moving. But that will tend to want me to make the rod move into a particular position. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to, interesting, we're actually going to stop catching the microphones, Arrogant. align it according to this gauge. That's too much. So this is going to be a fun time of loosening and tightening nuts just to get the rod to shift. So that's about right. Feels a little bit stiffer than it did before, but I'll need to tighten that end up shortly. Okay, one of the things I'm doing here actually is resting this guide on the two side frames. That's an assumption. The assumption being that they're identical and in identical places. But by doing that, it means that I'm not holding this at an angle, which will... if I held it at an angle, I might get a false reading off of it. Okay, it's interesting. That is actually right, but it just feels a little bit stiffer than it did before. But I'm going to go by the measurements. So let's just recheck this one, because now I need to just tighten that. And sorry about that. There isn't a lot of space around here. Doing the same thing, I'm resting it on the edge there. Right, that in theory is aligned, and in practice it's aligned. So, next thing, you know what? Let's lose the stuff off the right. There we go. So no face cam, just because it'll give you a bit more view of what you can see here. Bit more view of what you can see. That's English, isn't it? A bigger field of view. With the stuff on the right hand side, it was a bit awkward. So what we're going to do now actually is move this over. So what I'm going to do is turn this around a little bit. Is that still on camera? It is still on camera. I'm going to move this up here, which basically means it's going to drop off. So we'll basically let it drop off. So when this is on and this bearing is in place up here, this bearing is supposed to be exactly in line with that channel there. Because that's where the belt goes, and it goes around that bearing. And this is a spacer. Part of its job is to guide the belt, and keep the belt actually on that roller bearing. So I reckon that is aligned there. Now what I need to do is to move all these nuts into position basically. Now particularly this bottom one, the what I'm thinking for the bottom one is that I want this to sit square. So I want this to sit straight like that, not at an angle. If it sits at an angle, the belt is going to want to run one side or the other. So I don't know if it's going to talk about that later and about aligning it. Perhaps when it's running. Of course, it might not mention it at all. Yeah, okay, you're not going to stay there. I need to put this also onto something other than this desk, because for some reason in this direction it rocks, but I'm fairly sure this desk is flat, so I'm not quite sure why it rocks. So I'm going to have to put it either onto a large tile, because I don't have a glass plate that's that big, and if I did have one that's this big, it would bend if I supported it. So I've also got a granite worktop I can put this on. Now that ought to be flat, and so at some point I'll do that and just check, because this is rocking very well. It's about 1 millimeter off, and I don't understand why. Okay, so that's about there, looks okay. So just tighten those up and then tighten these up a little bit. Without things moving too much. I'm fairly sure then the next job is going to be to do the same thing with that pulley on the bottom. So let's tighten these nuts, of course remembering which way to turn them. Yep, that still spins okay. Of course, typically at this point in time what I'm likely to do is forget which way these nuts turn and loosen one. Is that still okay? It is. It's off slightly. So sighting that by eye, I suppose what I could do, will that, no, it won't work too well. Sighting it by eye, not a great way of doing it, but it's not bad. So what I'm doing is looking down the side here, so I can't, and then moving my eye this way until I can just not see the surface anymore. Then what I'm doing is looking between the top pieces here to see whether they're aligned. And they're not they're slightly off, so what I'm doing is just going to move this over that way a little bit. Yeah, also doing the same thing on the other side, just to make sure it's not. Yeah, it's equal on both sides now. So it could have been that this was a lot narrower, for example, and that would have caused that same effect. But that looks to be about right to me. So, having done that, I shall just scroll the instructions up. Repeat this at the other side. Okay, oh yes, there's two more, right. So what I'll do now is turn this around this way. Should put it here. Which of course the camera just can't quite see what I'm doing there. There we go. Right, so what I'm going to do is do the same thing on this side and also put the two belt guides in. And that's these two pieces of plastic here. So for anybody that's watching, what this is it's a very old now RepRap Pro kit. So this kit is about 2 years old. Yeah, at least 2 years old, which in 3D printer terms is really old. That way around, I think. Yes, because that will then press on the bearing in the centre, that's right. So these have got a these particular pieces, these guide the belt, but what they have is it's smooth on this side, but on this side it's got a raised centerpiece, and the idea of that being raised is that it presses on the center of the bearing, which holds the center of the bearing static when I tighten the nuts up, and then the outer bearing is the bit that spins with the belt on it. Ideally with a bearing you don't want both bits rotating. You hold, a bearing, usually you hold one part of the bearing still and the other part of the bearing is the bit that moves. So it's not a good idea that both bits move. So I'll just snap that into place. So again, this bearing is going to carry the belt, so the belt is going to wrap around here, but it's going to come through this, so it wants to be aligned, which that is about what it is. So I shall just tighten up these nuts that way and that way. I don't need to go ridiculous, I don't really want to sort of over tighten the bearing or anything. So it still wants to spin smoothly, I don't want to sort of crush it and distort it. There's no real need for that. It's not as though there's going to be any sort of stress on it. It's going to, the belt is going to pull it towards the centre rather than sort of sideways. So that's the belt guide in place, and then we fit the Y belt apparently. So the next job is finding the Y belt. In theory that's not a difficult job to do because it's black and it's a toothed belt and it should be around somewhere. There we go. Nice thing about this kit is it gives you a list of what's in all the bags, which is great. One belt 2 meters long. That probably means it's for more than just this. Yeah, it's probably for the other axes as well, I'm guessing. So what does it say? Don't cut it until you fitted it. That makes sense. You need the rest for the x-axis. Yeah, that's what I thought. And you don't want to cut it too short. That's true, because if you cut it short it's not going to work. So make sure that the Y motor cap screws are loose. Yes, it is. And the motor is as close to the frame as possible. Okay, so I'll loosen those off. So let's get a 2.5mm Allen. 2.5, where's the 2.5? Here's that one. Basically slide the motor as close to the body of the printer as it will go. So just make sure they are loose, and I probably could do with actually having a real Allen key for that, but or a hex key, because Allen key is actually a trade name. one thing about building 3D printers, goes a lot better with a cup of coffee. It will go quite nicely with a beer, but the problem with a beer is you might end up not building the printer properly. So to loosen the you tension the belt by pulling the motor away from the frame once it's fitted. Yeah, that makes sense. Usual thing for tightening up belts. Loosen the belt clamp on the motor side slightly and insert the belt under the clamp with the teeth facing upwards. Upwards. Okay. Wonder why. Upwards. The centre of the you don't need much spare, just the edge is fine. Loop the belt up over the top of the clamp, over the bearing, over the right. A picture might help. Oh, I see. Yeah, picture helps enormously. So we loosen this off. Which of course is fun because, yeah, right. Have I got a small... could do that, I suppose. Okay. So... that rod is loose. That rod should not be loose. That cross rod is supposed to be tight. Look at that. A little bit later, I'm going to need to put this onto a flat surface. So I could do with getting the correct spanner out for this, but I'm not going to. I'm going to use these pliers. These are parallel jaw pliers. So kind of like an adjustable spanner. So I'm not doing it right, but I'm doing it well enough. Doesn't really need an adjustable, a fixed spanner. But this could be fun, trying to do this. The ideal way, of course, to do this would be to tip it up. But if I tip it up, you guys probably won't be able to see what I'm doing. So just loosen those screws off enough. The idea being that what's going to happen is I'm going to take this and just catch it under there like that. So what then happens is that folds back over the top. So having put that just there, I'm sure this is going to get frustrating at this point with that belt moving and things, but on that piece of paper, you go bye-bye piece of paper, out the way. And now I clamp the belt down. Now these are nylock nuts, so basically they won't move once they're, well, they won't move. Unlike lock washers, which have to be tight, nylock nuts don't. But I'm just going to tighten that down until it feels tight enough? Right, so what happens now is this gets in a tangle, so we'll untangle it. Like so. It wraps over the top of there like that, and it will actually need to be reasonably tight. So I'm assuming that just goes straight over the top of that idler pulley, around the master on the motor, and then comes around there, and then up and over. There's an idler roller just inside here. I think then aligns the belt, or brings it up a lot closer to being parallel to the other side. I know what I'm talking about, or rather I know what I'm saying. It probably doesn't necessarily make sense, but I do know what I'm saying. I'm just not necessarily talking English. Do that sometimes. Right, so now then, that has to go over there and come underneath and be reasonably tight, and that's going to be a little bit of fun. It's actually not going to be too bad, I suppose, because having done that, what you then do is you move the motor, pull the motor away from the frame, which will tighten the belt up, so this doesn't have to be perfectly tight when I wrap it around there, but it would be a good idea for it to be as tight as reasonable. As tight as reasonable. What I mean by that is get it tight, but don't try too hard. Okay, so just loosen off these bolts. Like that. And then what we'll do is take the end of this without twisting it and push it underneath there, making sure the belt stays on the bearings. I said making sure the belt stays on the bearings. Belt, you're supposed to stay on the bearings. Thank you. Right. And then I pull that reasonably tight. Let it go a bit more. It would be good if I could get you to go just a little bit more. That seems okay. So what I do now is that will actually hold itself in place because the tooth belt is the teeth are catching on the edge of this piece of plastic, which is stopping it slipping, which is good. So I will just tighten that down there, not so tight that I start to crush the plastic. I don't have any spare parts for this, and until I have built it, I can't build any spare parts for it. But that is one of the first things that I will be building once this is printing, will be a set of spare parts. Right. The belt should be fairly loose. You can lock it in place by tightening the Y motor. Right, so make it tight, but not so tight that it bends these rods. And I don't think I'm bending these rods. I think that's actually tight enough as it is, without me needing to actually tighten the motor mount, which is relatively good, because what it means is as these will actually stretch. I'm sure they'll stretch, and then I've got a little bit more play. So what I'm going to do now is just tighten up the motor. Yeah, and this is where I could do with a proper 2.5mm hex wrench, but I can't be bothered going out into the garage to get one. There's just enough space to get the screwdriver in, like that. There we go. So cut the belt so it's flush with the edge of the frog, which is there. So I might as well do that with a scalpel. There, between the teeth will do. This is a scalpel. It's not a very sharp scalpel, but it's still sharp enough to slice my fingers. So there we go. And then I'm going to put this belt away, because I think I'm not going to need it again just yet, and I don't want to lose it. Belt goes in his bag. So I was about to say, keep the bench tidy. You can see what the bench looks like. It's not tidy, but it sort of is tidy. I keep putting things away. I don't leave bits out loose, because that way, although I know the plastic's out loose, but you lose it otherwise. Now then, yeah. The alignment is very slightly off, because the belt's being pushed this way. So something isn't quite perfect, but it's not far off. We'll see how that goes. Right, so the Y end stop. So I need a printed end stop holder, which is one of these. I need a micro switch. So I need some of the electronics. So where would the micro switch be? No, that's an extruder kit, and that's got nothing to do with this. Come on. That's a hot end. They're hot ends. That's a wiring kit. Water cable, times USB cable. That's the slave unit. Okay. It's possible they're in the box. I've got the box under the desk, so I'm just going to dig. I was about to say I'm going to dig out of sight, but of course you can't see me anyway. 3 per bag. 3 per bag. Okay, 3 micro switches, of which I only need 1. So this is a bag of connectors. Just reading the contents. It says here bag size, a medium bag and a small bag, and in the medium bag is the mains plug and this XLR connector, which suggests that this is the medium bag, but the small bag is inside the medium bag. It's like I get fascinated by the fact, well, fascinated, I just find it amusing that in kits and things like that you get the you get a sheet that gives you the table of contents, so bill of materials, whatever is in the box, and usually the first thing on that list is the list itself. So in your kit you will find a list of materials. So if you're missing the list of materials, I want to know how you know it's missing. So that's a micro switch, which is going to tell when the Y hits its end stop, so that way the electronics will know where it actually is, because once it hits the end stop, and so, basically it knows exactly where it is. Up until that point it doesn't. It guesses where it is, or it keeps track of where it thinks it is by the number of steps it stepped the motor. So it only actually knows when it triggers the end stops. And so we need 2.5mm 16mm cap screws, 2 of, and then an M3 30mm, 20mm. Laser, hello, welcome to the stream. As you can see, 2.5 like this, right? As you can see, doing some more on the bag of bag of nuts, on the printer. So I'm now looking for 2.5mm M2.5 cap head. That's those. Basically, a cap head is got a sort of a square top. All of these nuts that you see around here are cap heads. So these are 16mm. I want 2 of these. Quickest way usually to get into bags like this is instead of trying to pull them open, because they can get quite awkward trying to pull them open. Usually the easiest way is to do what I did there, which is just to slide it that way, and then it sort of automatically opens itself. It can save quite a bit of frustration, and I want an M320. No, it's not a problem. You look all you like, laser, and it is indeed. So this is an M3 3mm by 20mm long, so that's one of those. So I'm going to need now nuts for them, and an M2.5 washers. I want 4 washers. Having said slide, it usually works. There we go. So I want 4 washers. I'll try and do this without tipping them all over the place. And I thought I got more than one there, but I didn't. That's probably 2, 3, 1 more. Because I'm going to guess that they've given me exactly the right number of washers. I wonder if somebody actually sits there and counts them, or whether they just do it by weight. Now I want the nuts, so 2.5mm nuts. Again, I want 2 of those. That's one. And that's two. And then an M3. I've got the M3s out, so let's put, as I said earlier, put things away. Then I don't lose them. I am glad that they have labelled all the bags. That's a tremendous help. I've had kits in the past where the bags are not labelled and you have to just sort of measure them or count how many you've got to work out what it is that you're looking at. Particularly with the remote control models, I've had that, and it's a bit annoying, especially when you've used some of them. So I have a tendency, if I can, is to stick a label in the bag, because I don't usually have any sticky ones. So I'll get a piece of paper, write on what it is and stick it in the bag. And if they're the type of bag that you have to tear open, then I either cut it very carefully so I can stick sellotape on it, or I just stick, I've got some spare of these sorts of bags, just stick things in those bags just so that you don't lose the things. Okay, so what do we do now? So we mount it on one of the slide rails. Okay, using the M2.5 washers. Can't even speak. Nuts and cap screws to clamp the end stop to the end stop. Oh, the end stop to the end stop holder. You'll notice that the end stop holder has 4 holes. It does indeed. That's these 4 holes it says there. The end stop should be clamped to the outermost 2 holes with the nuts on the large flat side and a lever facing toward the bar clamp. Okay. You do it too. So that's going to go there, and it basically means that that's got to go there. And it's said to the outermost 2 holes. That does not make sense. I ask you, which are the outer 2 most holes? I could see it being either, well, it's definitely that one, but that could be the outer 2 most, or that one and that one could be the outer 2 most, because they're both outer. Guess what? It's that one and that one. Because that's the only way it will go through the nut. The bolts will go through the body of that micro switch. So fantastic instructions there. Use and then clamp it to the rod. Right, so that's going to be one of these with a washer. Nuts on the bottom, presumably. With the nuts on the large flat side, yeah. Ooh. Okay, that's fun. Those holes, I don't like that. Those holes are too tight. That one's okay. That hole there is just a little bit too I don't like what I'm going to do in a minute, which is screw it in. That's fine, that pushes through okay. This one won't. And what that means is it's going to put stress on the plastic. And generally speaking, I don't like that. but I don't. Where's my round file? Is that the round one? It is. I bet that's too big to go through there. Oh, just. Yeah, the hole is very slightly too small. It will go through if I cut a thread in it, basically, as I put the bolt in. But as I say, that will actually put stress on the plastic of the micro switch, which may or may not have, a detrimental effect on it. I mean, I know that, well, if the micro switch fails, then the printer doesn't know where the Y end is, but and it's actually intelligent enough to not keep banging it against it. After a while it goes, hey, I've lost the Y axis. No. I need to file that a little bit more. We're going about halfway through, yeah. So we'll file it from the other side. It's really hard with a needle file, especially in a small space like this, to keep it parallel to the hole. This isn't a precision hole, so if I don't have it exactly parallel all the way through, it won't matter. I just want it large enough so that the bolt will slide through without catching. Filing is a lot less stressful on the micro switch than it would otherwise be. Alright, that's not too bad. It's still not quite loose enough, but it's not bad. I also need to take that back off of there because I've put that through the wrong side. And the other thing I want, this is a 2.5mm, so there we go, the hex wrench is probably going to be 2mm. Yep, generally speaking they're 0.5mm, so if it's an M2.5 it's generally an M2 or a 2mm hex head, which is what that is. So just switch that bit there and put that back through. Now then, so that's going to go through there and put a washer on it and put a nut on it, and before I tighten that up I'll put the other nut through first. So it's a good idea not to tighten the nuts up straight away, because then it allows for a little bit of movement when you put this next bolt in. If you tighten it up you may find you can't actually get the bolt through like that. It's quite close tolerances, so it won't actually slide through, but it is in the right position to screw it in like that. And now then, when I tighten these up, it's just a matter of tightening them up. I don't have any positioning or to worry about positioning or alignment. Okay, I shall use my pliers. Again, this doesn't want to be cranked down. This is just a it's just a tight enough thing, and tight enough is a really subjective thing, but because I don't want to crush the plastic, I don't want to crush the micro switch. It's really just a case of making it so that the nuts don't vibrate loose. So this will actually get mounted on there, apparently. And what it will do is, as that comes in like that, it clicks the micro switch so it knows where it's going to be. Okay. There's even a special. I'll show you one of these because there's another one here. This has been printed, and it's been printed with a space on the top for a nut to sit in, so it doesn't spin. So when you tighten it up from this side, the nut doesn't spin, and you potentially don't need a spanner. You probably would with this, but there's a special note in the instructions that says if you've got one of those on that end, ignore it, because you're going to put the bolt through the other way. Because you don't want the end of the bolt to stick up and actually catch on this plate. So somebody designed it slightly wrongly. So this is where the M3 goes through. Yeah, and then having said if it has this ignore it then says put this nut into that space. Into the nut trap. Yeah, well, and without a washer as well. So I'm not going to tighten it up just yet. So it should be positioned so that that's just before that hits. Let's move that out of the way. Go down there. So just before the this thing hits that bed there, this should click off. That's the idea. I'm sure I'll probably get to adjust this again later. God, there isn't a lot of space under there. So ultimately, actually, where this end stop is, if you moved it a few millimeters this way, you're actually reducing your build volume. There. Yeah, that looks fine. And also interestingly, you can't, because of the way this is bent, this is actually not flat, it's pointing up a little bit, just because if it was flat then this thing is actually catching underneath. An interesting thing. So that wants to be 2.5 millimeters because that's an M3, and I'm going to have to hold the nut underneath because it's not captive. Try. Right. Whoops, a daisy. That was close. I nearly knocked my coffee on the floor. That would be disappointing. A, because I like the coffee, and B, it would make a mess on the carpet. Right. I don't want to crank that down too much. It's already bending quite a bit, but I could see it snapping if I'm not careful, but that does actually twist. I guess the main thing though is it doesn't slide forward and backwards, but it does rock. Which actually means that if it rocks, that changes the position of that micro switch. Hopefully though that doesn't happen when it's in production, because if that moves, it moves about a millimetre, that will actually change the zero position. So I guess that really depends on how often the printer homes the bed in order to tell where it is. Perhaps it only does that right at the start, in which case it's not a problem. But if it does it frequently to check its positioning, then and that moves in between, then your layers will be misaligned. Interesting, the picture does have it clamped down quite a bit. I just don't know how far I can trust the plastic to squash with before it shatters. So that's the y-axis complete. Next thing is the x-axis assembly, which is the one that goes this way. So let's take a look at what that is. 9:10. We're going a little bit more, I think. At least let's take a look at the x-axis assembly. Alright, so this is X and Z together. Okay, so we can put this printer to one side for the moment. Because the next bit is a standalone unit. Well, it's not a standalone unit, but it's built as a unit, which is then mounted into the printer, which means that all that the Z-axis alignment that we did, that's the vertical rods, will have to be done again, because this thing rides on those two metal rods. So what do I need? An M3 Allen key, okay, yeah, long nose pliers and tweezers, right. So I need two 428mm smooth rods. That's probably these two, and I'm guessing they're 428mm just purely based on the fact that they're the only two I've got. 428mm, yeah. Clean the bits off the desk, I don't want them on the rod. And actually we're just going to file the ends of those rods as well. Where's my square file? There it is. I've got a burr on the end, and at some point I'm going to be putting a bearing or something over this, and I don't want that burr to damage either the bearings or any of the plastic parts. So hopefully those of you who are watching aren't people that dislike the sound of filing. If it does, obviously you will need to just turn your sound down a little bit. Okay, that's got rid of the burr and the sharp edge as well. I'll do the same on this side, although this one is very slightly, it's almost as a, yeah, it isn't, this has not been cut, that's interesting, it's not been cut with a saw. This has been cut with something like the equivalent of a pipe cutter. which is basically a sharp wheel pressing down this spin, either the wheel around the rod or the rod in the wheel, and keep pressing, and it really sort of just slices through it like a knife. Because I can see a very slight curve on the edge here, and when I look on the end, it's all domed over. And I don't actually see any saw threads on the saw cuts on the edge either. This must be the end of one, because I'm just looking. That end and the other end look like it had been cut with a saw, so I'm guessing this is how the manufacturer sort of delivers long lengths to whoever has cut these rods to actual length for this kit. Yeah, that'll do. Yeah. So this isn't taking much, as you can see. It's just a very slight filing, but it's just enough to take that very sharp burr off. So we'll protect things, not least of which it'll protect my fingers as well. These things are often sharper than they seem, and if you do that and just spin it in your finger, you know, the rod in your fingers, and there's a sharp edge, you cut yourself, and it's not very nice. A bit like paper cuts, they're quite a rough knife, and they hurt. Once you realise you've cut yourself, they hurt. Right, that's enough. That'll do. So get rid of the metal filings, because again I don't want them on the rods either. Yeah, go off the end there, that'll do. So 2 of those. Printed X motor bracket. So I'm printed X motor bracket, that looks like an X motor bracket. And a printed X idler bracket. And a printed X idler cover. So it's not that, and it's not that. So we have to find one of those. It looks like that. There we go. And I need a bearing, a 623 bearing, which is 10mm diameter, which I'm glad it's told me. I just need to find the bag of bearings. I do need 3 linear bearings, which are those 3, which I'm leaving in the bag to keep them clean. So, bearings, where are you? They are loose somewhere. Okay, you know that bit I said about keeping everything tidy? That's an extruder drive kit. It's not going to be in there. There we go. Oh look, there's just one bearing in there. That's probably it then. Especially if it's 10mm across. It is. Okay. So I'll actually leave it in that bag just to keep it clean. I keep getting drops of water on my glasses. I want 2 M3 washers. Washers, washers, washers. Have I put you away? Did I put you away? I bet I did, didn't I? Huh. Okay. No, they're M8 and they're M3. 25? Oh, 3 M323 cap screws. I've got the 25mm M3s here. So I want 2 of these. I don't often lay kit parts out, but this thing is complicated enough to do it. I usually just sort of, go get the bits as I need them out the bags, but that's 2. I want some M3 washers. M3 washers. They're 2.5. For there, are you M3? You're M3. Okay, so I want 2 of these. Interesting, they're now 2.5mm nuts. 2 of those. So I now want an M3 by a 25. That's 2 of those with the washers. A 20mm cap screw. So an M3 20mm. That's one of these. And 3 M3 nuts. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I was thinking there's no nuts for these, and for some reason I was thinking they were 2.5mm. They're not. They're M3 by 25mm. Ah dear. That probably indicates I should give it a rest shortly. They're 2.5. I'm looking for M3 nuts. M3. M3, they'll be in the last place I look, which obviously isn't here. There they are. And interestingly, they were in the last place I looked. I want 3 of these. One. There's such a lot of counting on this channel, have you noticed? I'm always counting things, whether it's rings or nuts or washers. So at least you'll be able to get to count up to about 10 if you watch me enough times. Right, those can go back in that bag there. I did say in the bag, not down the outside of the bag. I might be able to count. I can't put bags in another bag, obviously. Right, so we then assemble the X-axis idler bracket. That's this thing. So we take an M3 by 20 cap screw. That must be, it is, it's that one, it's the short one. And a corresponding washer. Alright. And insert it through a hole. You know what, I should have brought my drills in, shouldn't I? well, I'm not going to get them now. I'll have to remember that for next time. What I'm going to do is just file this slightly. It's the bottom layer. It squishes out, which means that if they've designed this hole to be take a 2.5mm screw and nut straight through it, because the bottom layer squishes, it actually closes up that hole a little bit. Their English is English, but it's really okay. Begin by assembling the idler bracket. Take one M3x20 cap screw and a corresponding washer and insert it through the hole in the centre of the part as shown below, which is what I've done. Then insert the assembly through the idler bearing, through the cover, and secure with an M3 nut and washer. Thanks very much, Laser. Oh, right, so the cover. Okay, why do you talk about the... Oh, that's that thing. Yeah, so I've got to insert this through a bearing and a cover. In other words, I put a bearing on there, then I put the cover on top of it, then I put the nut on. Right. That's a weird language sometimes. I like learning stuff, Laser, so hopefully everybody else does as well. I was about to say, I wonder how on earth this actually does anything. But then I realised that these, because I thought it was enclosed completely, but there's two slots here which go all the way through. So I'm guessing that this just keeps the two, the belt apart, so to speak. So I put that on top of there, like so, which should then go into, like that, snap in. Yeah, that's nice. That'll be fun to get out again if I wanted it. Now, it'll bug me a little bit because that's not quite low. There we go, I've just pushed it in level. But if I did want that out, what I'd do is push the nut out and then push it in, misaligning it with the hole slightly, and eventually it'll pop that piece of plastic out, I'm guessing. So I put another washer on and then put the M3 nut on top of it. Now that'll want a little bit of tightening, but not a lot. Again, probably just enough to stop the nut unravelling, or even the bolt, which would be more likely. As the bearing spins, it might, if it rubs on the nut, if the centre of the bearing isn't clamped, then eventually it would drag the nut undone, depending on which way it's spinning. Insert two M3 into two M3 nuts into the back. Okay, into there. Right, so these go in there. They're supposed to be really tight. Oh, tight. I'm not sure they're meant to be that tight though. Let me adjust, because they're squished again. So I'm moving this file side to side this time. That's draw filing, just to get technical. Now will that go in? No, not quite. I don't know where my little flat file, this flat needle file has got, so the square one won't go in this hole. So I'm just filing the original surface, or the bottom layer. As I say, it gets squished out. So right, pair of pliers. I'll use these. These are a little bit safer to use than the needle nose pliers, just because these are parallel jawed, so they don't have as much of a tendency to want to shoot what they're holding out the end. Yeah, intentionally a tight fit, I agree. An impossible fit? Still, it's not bad engineering to say it was printed. These are all printed parts. I want you, what I'm trying to do is just align it. It's a hexagonal nut, so two sides are vertical, so to speak, and this thing is just wide enough for those two to go in, but you've got to get them in. Actually, it's probably again squished. It'll be the squish. It's just stopping them going in. So, bit of filing. They're really just captive holes, are these. So I know it says here a tight fit, but the actual tightness of the fit isn't really important, because what I'm going to do then apparently is put the two nuts in the end, the two bolts in the end. That's it. So that then needs to come down enough apparently enough to get a nut in the end there. That's it. I think. No, that didn't, did it? Yes, it is. That should be just enough to get that in without cross-threading it. No, it's not. It's not quite down far enough. It is important that you don't cross-thread. That's it. So when you put this in, if it doesn't want to twist, then it's very likely you've cross-threaded it, and that's not what you want. And that's going to need a little bit of filing as well. I don't know what the actual layer height of this is. It's probably sort of about 1/10 of a millimetre or something, but it's very fine. As I understand it, this printer, I was about to say, actually printed its own parts. Well, this printer didn't, but another one of this model did. Printed these parts. So yeah, I suppose in a way it's a good indication of just what you can do with the printer. Now that one went in a lot easier. So then nope, that one's not. That's not gone down far enough. Okay, Laser. Have a great night. I'm due to, as soon as I've just done this assembly here, I'm going to stop. So I'm not. You're not going to miss much. But have a great night. Thank you very much for dropping in and saying hello. And I look forward to seeing you again later. Right. Am I spinning that? Yes, I am. Okay, so that's that one in. So I take the two rods, put them in there. That's going to need a bit of filing. I have to use my semicircular file. There we go. In this being printed, as you come over the, when you print a hole, or you don't print the hole, but you know what I mean, when you print to leave a hole, as the print head comes over the top, there's no support for the bit of plastic that it deposits, so they have a slight tendency to sag. Depends on all sorts of things, like how much cooling you've got and how fast you're extruding and how hot the plastic is and things, but there's a tendency to sag, which just makes the hole itself not quite round. There we go. That's one rod in. So you just need a little bit of sanding there just to make them. They're not parallel. I don't know if you've noticed. It might look it there, but when I actually look at my end, they're narrower here than they are at that end. But I'm sure that sorts itself out. Are they the same length? Near enough. Ensure the rods are completely inserted into the bracket, then insert the free ends of the yeah, they're inserted. So I'm going to put that way to match that diagram. Slide the linear bearings onto the rods. Note the orientation of the bearings when looking at the top complex side of the idler bracket. That's obviously this side, I think. Two bearings go on the top bar, with one on the bottom bar. So I'll get these bearings out of here. Okay, that's a bag I don't need anymore. And this is another reason why I file the ends down, because putting that over, if I caught the bearing and scratched it, or actually indeed ripped the balls out, then it would be a real pain. These things aren't terribly expensive, but they also aren't terribly cheap either. So one at a time. I want two on this top bar. But I'm glad to say they are sliding on really smoothly, like that. And then we insert them into this bracket, which is the motor bracket, and there we go. Okay, pressing down on the desk, easy and trying to do the strongman act. I'm trying to push them like that. I can put almost all my weight on that to make sure they're both pressed in. And that's the X-axis assembly. The next thing will be the X motor assembly, but we're not going to do that today. I think we shall leave it at this point here and leave the X motor assembly for the next episode. So that will be another stepper motor, which would go in here at this end with a pulley on it. Plastic ones, because I haven't got the upgrade, which was the metal ones. And that will then goes into here. Yeah. So the X motor goes in here, the X carriage goes on top of here, and it's then driven backwards and forwards across here. And then what you get with this, because it sits this way, then this ends up riding up and down the Z-axis. And I'm looking at this and I'm wondering, it looks like it goes up and down the Z-axis without bearings, linear bearings. It's just going to ride in these slots here. Oh well. So yes, the X-axis motor, and then the Z-stop end adjuster. That's another one of those micro switches which detect where this is up and down wise. But there we go. That is it, I think. So we'll switch to that camera and say thank you everybody for watching. Hope you have enjoyed watching an old RepRap 3D printer kit being assembled part at a time. So we've got the main Y axis, and the main frame is basically done. The Y axis is basically done. That's the one that goes front to back. We've just done here the Z axis frame, which is carries the Z axis carriage left to right. And this itself moves in the Z direction, which is up and down. So next time, as I say, we'll add the X-axis motor and then the end stop, which tells it where this is vertically. I guess there'll be a next one somewhere as well. But that will almost certainly be next weekend. If I do manage to do any streaming in the week, it will probably be some jewellery, some micro mail, chain mail, or possibly I might even get round to doing some of the niobium rings that I've got. Yeah, obviously if you enjoyed the stream, thank you. It'd be nice if you followed, that would be great. It'd be great if you subscribed, but I'm not expecting that. But nice if you followed, that way at least you'll get notifications when I do go live. But I also do tweet. A tweet goes out when I go live, and occasionally when I know what I'm doing or not know what I'm not doing, I will send out the odd tweet as well. It's at Zaragonart. And you can also find a little bit about some of the crafts that I do on my website, zaragonart.com, where you'll see there's a little bit of explanation about things like the pyrography and things like that as well, and you'll find some of those, a short form of that as well, just under the window here, under the stream window. Hopefully shortly as well there'll be a YouTube channel. That's coming. I shall give you more information when that's available. But the virtually the whole history of the stream from Twitch should be going up there at some point in the future. In the meantime, thank you again for watching. Hope I'll see you on a future stream, and bye for now.